Hi everyone, welcome to Farsight's ET News, the news show that tells you what the extraterrestrials are up to starting in late February 2023. This ET News show complements our human news forecast that is published at the end of each month. But this ET News show is published only on Farsight's video streaming service, farsightprime.com. Farsight's ET News is cutting edge, more than a bit controversial, and absolutely need to know. And it is what you need to know. I am Yemi Janae from Farsight. Time travelers, let's talk about the two major ways that our galaxy organizes itself. Free will versus authoritarian. You know the saying, as above, so below. Well, what we see right here on Earth is a reflection of what is happening across our galaxy and many of our projects at Farsight. We see the parallel time and time again, over and over. Let's start with the authoritarian perspective. Since it is hard to understand the free will perspective unless you understand the authoritarian side of the equation first. Authoritarian governance happens because there are some subjects who see that there are problems in the society, and those problems could be fixed if there was someone in control who could organize things. Trouble is, the masses are quite a diverse group, and it is often impossible to get the masses to agree to one way of doing things. So the subjects who are really driven to fix things the way they see them needing to be fixed try to figure out ways to control the masses without involving them in the decision-making process. The authoritarians then set themselves up as leaders in a top-down effort to control the masses, much like pet owners let pets know that they are in ultimate control. The pet owner can be nice or cruel to the pet, but the pet knows that ultimately the owner has the last word.
These other subjects come in a non-surface structure. They're like, we know this guy's here and we're coming for him. And they destroy the whole area looking for him. He or this subject that they're looking for gets away because these other subjects help him.
Well, human masses are more difficult to control than animal pets. So authoritarian leaders have to use all the means at their disposal in order to control the masses. The least expensive way of doing this is to tightly control the information that the masses have access to. Whenever you see any human leader trying to control the information that the masses can access, you see evidence of the basic approach to control. Trouble starts when the masses can get access to contrary information. Despite these controls, then the masses start to object in all sorts of creative ways. And at that point, authoritarian leaders, they try different and more expensive ways of controlling the masses. Propaganda is the next option that authoritarian leaders attempt, and that is when those leaders transmit information through all available means that contradicts the information that the masses are getting through other sources. This leads to confusion among the masses. The propaganda will hit the masses from all the directions.
Yeah, so all of this stuff happening with the non-human subjects and the flesh mob is just happening somewhere around here in this network of underground structural maze, this underground structure maze. So that's basically the general location of where all of this is happening.
It is important for authoritarian leaders to force the media to toe the line. So the jobs of newscasters and those higher up in the chain of command are at risk if they spread any information that is different of the party line, so to speak. Often, most of the masses get along with this. However, trouble can occur if the masses are experiencing distress that seriously contradicts what the propaganda sources are saying. Examples can be when troops are killed in wars and mothers of those troops start hearing about their children dying in battle. When there are enough deaths, the masses, the mothers, often simply stop believing all the propaganda. Similarly, serious economic problems can cause the masses to stop believing in the truthfulness of propaganda sources. And the roles of the types of troubles are the key to understanding why authoritarian forces can stay in power so long. It normally takes a lot of distress for the masses to rise up and stop believing in the lies that the authoritarian leaderships are giving us. So, unless there's a crisis of some sort, the masses normally do not rise up and authoritarian leaders stay in control. Now let's move on to the free will approach of governing. You see, the free will leaders know all the tricks of the authoritarian forces, and there is great temptation to use some of these tricks to push the masses into some outcome that is desired by the free will leaders. So, when we have a situation in which one does not really have a true free will society, but rather a hybrid situation. Most democratic governments on Earth are such hybrid forms. There is also an attempt to address the wishes of the masses, usually by having periodic elections. Between those elections, the democratic governments need to get stuff done so that their societies can function. So they do what they feel they must in order to obtain the support of the masses and get policies enacted. But every time a free will society borrows one of the tricks of the authoritarian societies to get something done, they open up pathways for people in groups to further corrupt the process. That is what happens when certain groups become very powerful influencers in the enactment of policies. So,
these non-human subjects are here to protect the structure, maybe in like working with these non-living energy beings. So like a protection or even like maintenance of the structure, like, because this is a very isolated area, very dry here.
Let's connect all this to what we have going on with the extraterrestrials in the near Earth environment. You see, in democratic societies on Earth, the highly organized groups control the game. So you are not going to get disclosure simply by asking for it. Disclosure of the ET presence on Earth would change human societies a great deal, and many who are in power or have high levels of influence in democratic societies could lose their advantage if the masses knew everything that they have been doing to keep things under their control. So, disclosure will not happen just because some people think it's the right thing to do. Nope, it doesn't work that way. Subjects seem to be like starting some of the chaotic things, like there's chaoticness happening and the subjects are causing some of them to happen. Now, what about the extraterrestrials themselves? True free will ETs understand that hybrid democratic societies are highly compromised, and they understand that the authoritarian practices are rampant in all earthly governments, regardless of whether or not they have elections. So some free will ET societies believe that there can be little compromise when it comes to free will. They believe that a free will society must have the true input of the masses, not just the manipulative tricks of organized interest groups. One way or another, the masses must be involved. So this means only one thing. There needs to be a crisis that can overload the controlling capabilities of the authoritarian forces, both the authoritarian extraterrestrials as well as their human puppets that exist in both authoritarian and democratic nations. There needs to be a crisis that disputes the existing system. That is the only way that the masses will rise up and assert themselves. It is the only path open to such a society for the real change. Without that crisis, enslavement and control is the only outcome that can happen. The masses must participate in creating their own future. You may say that this is just another form of manipulation, sort of like kicking someone so that they will move off the train tracks before they are getting hit by an oncoming train. And to some extent, you would be correct. But perhaps you can call it partipulation rather than manipulation, since the masses are then participating in their own manipulation. Partipulation, think about it. Do you want to be involved in how you're manipulated? Or do you want to be a passive victim of how others manipulate you? That really spoke to me right there.
It's the whole reason these subjects have met to talk. Probing deeper, it feels like there is something inside this, something of great importance. I don't know if it's like objects within it or installation, something installed within it that bears great importance.
As far as we at Farsight are concerned, we prefer partipulation over manipulation. That is why we do our remote viewing projects. We want you to see how others have been manipulating you so that you can gain the energy to start participating and creating a new and better future. It is the only way that we can win. It is the only way you can win. Oh, and by the way, here's another clip of the UFOs that we have shot with our own cameras at Farsight. The big takeaway is not that there's any one clip that you can see that will be convincing to you against the backdrop of decades and decades of manipulation, which you've already been exposed to. Rather, it is that we are showing you how to take your own videos of the UFOs reliably time and time again, so that you can participate in spreading the word of how to get access to your own proof. So take a look at this video clip as an example of what you can do. And remember that you can learn how to make such videos by watching our monthly intelligence briefings that are available to our paid subscribers on farsightprime.com, where we go over all the details of how to do it.
Okay, so this is the setup that I've got today. I've got the two cameras, one a GH5 here, which is in visible light, and a GH6 here, which is in IR. And I'm using the supercolor IR, which is in the 580, 590 nanometer range, okay, for that IR. And for the GH5, it's visible light, so whatever is up there, we get to see if it's going to be that way. All right, so everything is set up. I'm running at 120 frames a second for the GH6. The GH5, I'm maxed out at 60 frames a second. So I've got 60 frames a second for the GH5 and 120 frames for the GH6, which for UFO photography makes the GH6 a bit better than the GH5. That frame rate is the key because these things move crazy fast, these UFOs. All right, now unfortunately I don't have many clouds. I have a few clouds above me, so it's mostly visible. Just blue sky, but you have to deal with what you have to deal with. So this is the time. I had to wait till this time of the day. I had some clouds earlier. I had to wait till this time of the day so that the sun would be on the other side of the house and that I would be in the shade right here, okay? Because the shade is what I need in order to protect the lens so that the sun doesn't hit the lens and produce this crazy glare. Okay, and I've got the thing set up on the right tripod and so on like that. Now I put the things into sync. I'm turning the cameras on at the exact same time, but at the exact same time I'm also clapping. And that gives 3 spikes on the waveform. And when the 3 spikes on the waveform for the audio are in the computer, I line them up that way. So I line up the 3 spikes for each track so that each camera is perfectly in sync. Now notice that the GH5 is exactly opposite that. It's flipped vertically. So in order to get the GH5 and the GH6 to match up in post, when I'm using Adobe Premiere, I have to flip the image both horizontally and vertically in order so that the image matches up between the GH5 and the GH6 on the screen so that I can check to see if the UFO that's visible in ultraviolet, in infrared, is also visible in the invisible light. So I have to sync them up so that when I go from one to the next, I can see exactly at that very moment. All right, this is the setup.
So now, let's move on to this month's ET News. Let's find out what those guys are up to up there.